when it comes to normalizing that data and making decisions around that data, we have to have quality. And so we know that Eskimos have 1,000 words for snow. And it seems like in the contact center industry, you might have 50 ways to describe and measure abandonment alone.
Yeah.
What insights can you provide to practitioners in addressing this challenge?
So in cases like this, it's really important to understand like where you currently stand today. Taking a look at the infrastructure and the architecture that you have available today, understanding where it's lacking now. Given the architecture that you have today, you may have a problem of inconsistent data capture, as an example. You may be using different tools that have different capturing metrics that can lead to discrepancies in data collection, maybe discrepancies in reporting. One of the things that we've noticed ourselves is a lot of different tools will provide you different APIs. You may have an API that gives you detailed logs, and you may have an API that gives you summarized logs. Now, the assumption would be that the data for those two should match up. Now, the real life case is that it doesn't match up, and you may think that there's something wrong with those APIs, but when you dig a bit deeper, you realize the context behind them is a little bit different. So understanding like where data is inconsistent and understanding where data is just different. And it kind of comes back to selecting the right tool that you use to pull that data, and really understanding the right APIs. Like when we've worked on data projects, the data dictionary alone for every solution provider is massive. So working with the right solution provider who gives you the right context and an understanding is very, very important in avoiding quality issues. Other things to kind of think about is like data decay. Now, when you talk about data over a very large period of time, often that data may become outdated. The customer's preferences might change. Again, where CDP might come in handy is it can help you ensure that the data from all of those different streams stays up to date, to ensure that cross-functional data is present in every single system. It can allow you to build a much deeper marketing strategy to avoid problems of data decay. The one thing that we haven't talked about so far is human error. And of course, that's very common. We are humans, we will make mistakes. When you have manual data entry or categorizations, you have the chances of errors. You need your system built in a way to encounter those errors, to tackle those errors, to think about how you can minimize those errors. But if you're living in a world where you feel like human errors don't exist, again, you're not understanding data in the right way. Other things to kind of think about is incomplete records. And this comes back to our APIs again. You may have real-time data that you pull right now. That real-time data may not match with the real-time data that you pull in another hour. Now, again, you may think there's something wrong with the API, but what you really have to think about is when you pulled the results in hour one, there were still some calls ongoing. There may have been some calls that were still being categorized. When you pulled it again in hour two, the data would change a little bit. So whenever you're taking decisions, it's very important to kind of have that margin there that you understand that data might differ. Having these kinds of understanding will avoid making very rash decisions and will lead to much smarter moves and decisions. Lastly, just duplication, Frank. When you have so many different systems, you're talking about similar data that might be coming from some of these platforms. And when you have duplication, it's very important in the architecture that you set up or the data lake that you may create, you have processes in place to really address that duplication, reduce that duplication, or at least provide some context to it. So when you're making decisions, you're not necessarily making it based on those duplicates.